Hey, this is Mike Zwick from If Not For God podcast. Our show, stories of hopelessness turned into hope. Your chosen Truth Network podcast is starting in just seconds. Enjoy it, share it, but most of all, thank you for listening and for choosing the Truth Podcast Network.
This is the Truth Network.
Coming to you from an entrenched barricade deep in the heart of central North Carolina. Masculine Journey After Hours. A time to go deeper and be more transparent on the topic covered on this week's broadcast. So sit back and join us on this adventure. The Masculine Journey After Hours starts here now.
Welcome to Masculine Journey After Hours, and we are talking about legacy this week. And, I wish we could record in between the shows. Because, sometimes I think we leave so much there.
That's how this podcast started.
That's true.
I mean, honestly, that's how the After Hours started, is because we said, there's a lot of stuff that goes on after hours that the machine gets primed for the regular show, and then after hours we tend to go a lot deeper. And man, wouldn't it be great if we could share that with our listeners? And so true. Now, okay, this podcast is going to have to go back to 47 minutes. We're just going to have to start taping, the moment the mics go off.
Yeah. Not after hours. Between the shows.
Yes. It'll be I don't know. We'll have to come up with another bunker, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, exactly. But legacy, we did talk a lot during the break between shows. For you don't know, we take about a 7-minute, 10-minute break between the shows and come back. And honestly, there's a lot we discussed during that time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that comes up that God prompts in our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what becomes the After Hours show, is what's God working on our heart on this topic right now.
Right. Sometimes we get a little healing between the time. We get a little vision. Yeah,
vision of warfare anyway.
Yeah. And we get to see how it's affecting others and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a blessing to be in this group. We've got, 7 guys in the studio tonight. And any given night we'll have anywhere between 4 and 10, probably. And so it's just a cool time.
It is. So a question that I like to do, I guess, I never prompt you guys for, but what's God working on your heart right now on this topic of legacy?
For me, it's raising some grandchildren and continuing to love on my children. My son and my daughter, who I'm both extremely proud of both of them. They do amazing things in life, and it's not always easy for them. It mainly has to do with their father wounds, I'm sure. But they're both overcoming that and allowing Jesus to speak into that and get some healing. But my son is a great father and a great husband, and my daughter is a great mom and a great wife, and I want to continue to honor them in that, but now there's grandchildren. I have 6 grandchildren, and so loving on them, and one of them lives with me full time, and so trying to not be the same dad I was for my 2 children, which I was a different dad for my daughter than I was for my son. I mean, and it's pretty obvious to them, and it's obvious to me. And they point out regularly, as we talked about in the show, that I'm a different father, to my grandson. And they both always go, if I'd have done that, you'd have killed me. Well, you're right, I would have, but I'm not that guy anymore, and Carson's not you, so shut up.
And I still may. The day's,
that's right.
The day's not over.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, so that's where I'm at right now, is trying to do that, and having you guys around me is helpful with that, because I want Carson to have time with each one of you guys, separate, apart from me. I want that to be part of my legacy, is that I arranged for him to have good mentors around him. I arranged for him to have people in his life that when I'm not around, or even if I am around, that they can speak goodness and love and mercy and justice into his life, and give him a foundation that's much broader than the one that I could lay down by myself.
One of the things that happens at boot camp is the new name. And that's when, like in one of the covenants of silence type areas where we try to find out, well, what does God call me? I think he called me loyal. That's something that has been very important to me for a long, long time. And quite some years ago, I was thinking about, well, what would I want on my tombstone? And I thought he was there when I needed him. I couldn't think of anything that I would rather have said about me than that I could be depended upon when needed. And taking people to the airport, taking people to the hospital for treatment, being there when somebody's having surgery. It really killed me that I couldn't be there with Gaither.
Sitting in the car with Jan and trying to think of my friend's name all the way back to Durham. You were there, Harold.
Clay.
Clay, yeah.
And Clay's probably listening right now.
Yeah.
He knows that there was some talking going on there between the seats, yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's the willingness to drive 2 hours, an hour and a half.
So, to me, thinking about legacy, and I'm probably, if things go the normal route of humankind, I'll probably be leaving mine before the rest of you guys, since I'm the oldest guy in the group. But you never know. But I think legacy is important because it can become a goal that can drive the actions that you take. So that's kind of how I feel about legacy.
Yeah, I did notice you looked at me when you said you never know if it's going to be you or not. You looked like right at me. I'm like, thanks, Harold. Appreciate that, man. You're absolutely right. For me, I think about each of my kids, and they were all raised by a different dad. Yes, they were all me, but I was at a different place. And my boys got the biggest benefit because, that's when God really stepped in, really between my girls when they were around and they were little and my boys when they were little. God did some real healing in my life and really changed me in a lot of ways. And I really do believe I'm a lot different father to Eli, even than I was to Caleb, even though there's 6 years difference, but definitely than there is to Rachel or to Sydney. And so as I think back of this legacy, part of it is what was I like in their lives to the best as I can see? And God, how do I need to love them now to kind of overcome some of that? How do I leave the legacy I want to leave, that he was a loving man, that he was there for me, that he did care about me. At the end of the day, I know Dad accepts me for who I am. The things that really are important to my heart, how do I now go build that in my relationship with this child uniquely and this child uniquely?
And I think about, I'm not the spring chicken in here anywhere. I'm 64 years old. And like you guys, I was a different dad, also a different grandparent. However, those scars are still there from healing that I didn't get clear up to this last boot camp. Because the last boot camp, you've heard me talk either on the show or on a Christian Car Guy about the agreement that I had that I was a disappointment. And somehow or another, I can now see in one of my children where they have completely adopted that, and I can actually see the warfare of Satan speaking into that. So I can see, oh, this is interesting, that what they are perceiving is not even real, yet they too have bought into the agreement that I had made many, many, many years ago and carried with me into my 60s. And so, wow, now I have an opportunity to not only speak into that agreement, but even share my own story of how I saw that in my own father and how it just simply was not true. And fortunately, God poured into me through you guys, literally. At this last boot camp, on all sorts of different fronts, praying for me, speaking into that, and knowing me, at that point is loving me well, so that I will be in a position to speak through that with the kids. And I think, oh my goodness, I bet you there's a whole bunch of these that I've passed on to the a legacy I didn't want, but now I have an opportunity that God's given me the grace to see things that I can work on very specifically of agreements that I had made that I can see my kids have fallen into the same thing.
Yeah, I look at some things and I realize it can't be, there's no silver bullet.
No.
Right? I can't, buy them the perfect Christmas gift and all of a sudden they're going to say, oh, Dad was wonderful, right? Can't take them on the special trip that fixes everything. Can I do those things in addition to those? Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the daily decisions. It's in the moment. It's when I don't feel like doing something decisions. When I'm tired from work and Eli wants to do something, or Caleb wants to do something, or Sydney wants to talk, Rachel wants to talk, whatever that is, that I take time to be present. Because I really, really like to check out. I almost feel like I've earned it throughout the day, and it's going to take me being intentional to engage.
That's not true.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
Can I not check out at the end of the day? Have I not earned it?
When everybody else goes to bed.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. Now, I want to speak into what Robbie was saying a little bit and piggyback on what he was saying, but use his story as an example without his permission. But if you're listening right now and you've read scriptures like the sins of fathers will be visited on the third and the fourth generations, this is what we're talking about. It's that exact, the agreement that I'm a disappointment to my father. It's not necessarily the sin of adultery, although it could be, or the sin of alcoholism, although it could be. It's not those always. It's not those horrible, socially unacceptable sins, okay? More than not, I would say it's this type of thing. It's a generational curse that I'm a disappointment, or I'm dangerous, I hurt people. And when you act out of that, there is no way that Satan isn't going to take that and use it. And so if you're young, if you're almost 80 like Harold, 79, but I'm thinking you're probably pretty proud of being almost 80. So even if you're 64, if you're 55, if you're 32, don't look at it and go, well, it's too much. I can't overcome that. I can't undo all that, the generational curses that I've pronounced upon my kids, knowingly or unknowingly. Most of them, I would say unknowingly, but there's probably some knowingly. When you knowingly commit a sin over and over and over again, and it affects your children, yeah, it's probably going to be visited upon them as well. If you're struggling with pornography and you continue to do that, don't be surprised when your child is also struggling with pornography or struggling with sexual addiction or struggling with adultery. When you let Satan in the house like that, he's going to beat the crap out of you and your family because you've let him in that way. But then there's this other category of the agreements that I've made that I don't even know about. But I love the way Robbie handles that and has handled that in saying, wait, I'm 64 years old, and that's an agreement I've been living with my entire life, or as long as I can remember, but I'm not going to let that be my legacy. And it's not too late to begin to affect it in the next generation. There are things Jesus has to undo that I can't undo, but being willing to go there with him is huge, instead of just being defeatist and saying, well, it's too much water under the bridge.
Yeah, and I think it's key that you obviously have to walk with him through it, because you have to say, okay, God, Jesus, how do I step into that? How do I speak into that? How do I not be the voice of the enemy in that? Right? I mean, how do I avoid certain things, or how do I engage in certain things, or how do I handle it today, in this moment, not even today, in this minute? Because it may change in 15 minutes.
And it's absolutely critical that you walk with people that are authentic. In other words, had I not been sitting there listening to Rodney talk about his agreement, and Sam over talking about in the warfare talk his agreement, and men that are willing to stand up there and say, I struggle with pornography. Just think where Jerry Falwell Jr. would be right this minute had we just gotten him to a boot camp. I mean, and
had he allowed some authentic people around him,
right,
he wouldn't have to be where he's at right now.
No, it's a crying shame that we need people around us that are sharing their real struggles. Like Paul would say, this is my weakness. And so I'm going to boast about my weakness so that Christ will come in and be the hero. And because you guys boasted about what your struggles were, I can't, over the last 12 years or how long it's been, oh my goodness, the healing that's been available. And because of that, yes, it transfers over to so much what your legacy is and what your children get a chance to benefit from. And your wife, in my case, I can't tell you, how I see my agreements and whatever are affecting her daily. And again, the struggles.
One of the things I think is really cool that I hadn't thought about, but one of the legacies I'm really excited that's happened because of you guys, because of the ministry, is I at least know my boys will never watch a movie the same way. They'll never watch a TV show the same way because they'll both, we've been watching something, or I even get a text say, hey, you got to watch this at this part because there's a great clip on this, on warfare, on, sonship, on whatever. That's a legacy. And I promise you they're going to teach their kids that. That God's story is through that. And so that's one thing I'm excited about. Hey, with your guys' help, I probably got that one a little right.
Well, going back to something you said, we live in a microwave world. Mm-hmm. We want the quick fix. There's got to be an app for this, something to that effect. And so, but what we end up with is the discipline of, okay, I've seen this agreement, I've seen this behavior. What do I do differently? Having come out of addictions and that, the good news is that those negative things we pass on, we also pass on good things. Mm-hmm. And I did a whole series. The guys in the ministry I used to be in, they used to roll their eyes when they would see an acorn, because I studied an acorn, and it takes 10 years for an oak tree to produce acorns. So fruit doesn't come quickly was the point, and they wished I would have made the point much quicker. But isn't there an app for this? But anyway, that's what I think about it. When I look at my wife, when I look at my kids, I go, hey, this takes some input. This takes some pain and some struggle. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, as I look around the room, Harold, who's the oldest, is the one that's definitely in the best shape. Because except for baby Rodney, and I look around at the rest of us going, I can go out tomorrow and I can say I'm going to go walk 30 miles, which I wouldn't be able to do. But if I walked a mile a day for 30 days, that makes a bigger difference.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same way with this legacy. It's what I do repeatedly over time and reinforced over time that makes the difference. It's not going to be the one big event.
But also, when it comes to fitness, you tend to do what you love doing, right? And so from my standpoint, to be with you guys on Tuesday night, I absolutely love doing it. Amen. And so, that's the beauty of what God has had for us, and I think it's available for men everywhere. If they begin to walk authentically, God will begin to provide people in their life to do that with, and then you're going to do it because you love it. It's like, do I love boot camp? Oh my gosh, would I not? Anybody knows me knows I would not miss one, short of, the second coming.
Yeah, or the third.
I do think we need to caution a little bit about being authentic. It has to be in the realm of walking with Jesus. Because being authentic just to be authentic, I know a lot of people that do that. They're not real pleasant to be around.
Yeah. I mean, there's some great comedians that have been pretty authentic, actually. Yeah. It's not healing their soul, and it's not helping very many others. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, being authentic in a grace-based, redemptive community is... it's the only way to survive this life. I mean, with Jesus, obviously it's got to be grace-based. Jesus has got to be the center of it. And it's got to be an authentic community of people, redemptive community, where we understand the whole point of being in this community is to redeem each other, to redeem our own brokenness, and to allow Jesus to redeem it more, and to redeem each other. And is it hard? Yeah, it's hard. We get on each other on a regular basis. I mean, there's not usually a month or two that doesn't go by that Robbie and I don't have a crossword with each other at some point. It's always his fault. But yeah, I was trying to not scare the listeners, Sam. But anyway, it's hard. It's super hard. But let's face it, most people go to a church where there's not any of that authentic community. And if you lead a Christian university or you lead a mega church, you don't have a safe place. I'm creating a place right now. I mean, my homestead that I'm creating, the ultimate goal there is to have a place where a pastor and his wife, a ministry leader and his wife, whatever, can come there and hide out for whatever period of time and get loved on and get prayed over and get ministered to, and it be a safe place. The problem is if I go to every church in the country and tell them that story, well, when their pastor decides they want to go, what do they know? Oh no, my pastor's broken.
He's got secrets.
Yeah, he's got secrets. Yeah. He's got something in the wood pile that we need to be worried about. Yes, he does. And if you hadn't figured that out yet, you're an idiot. Every human alive has problems.
How do you really feel, Darren?
Well, I'm a little passionate about this one. Yeah. But honestly, I mean, that's the problem is we have got pastors and leaders who are scared to be authentic because they're afraid of the cost of being authentic. It'll cost me my job. It'll cost me my kingdom. Sin will cost you your kingdom.
But that's why you got to be part of a group you can trust. Because if you're a part of a group like this, you know you're not going to get shot in the back with an arrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, if we do shoot you in the back, we at least pull it out.
Yeah, intend to it. You know, that's, I guess if I would say this word, we're just really an accountability group. You guys have all grown. Right? Because that's not it. Accountability is part of redemptive community, but it's such a small part, right? I mean, it plays a role.
I wouldn't even say it plays a role, to go on like, oh man, please don't think that you need to report to me what in the world you looked at on the internet and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I would hope that you would just feel like, gee, if I'm falling somewhere, I can tell my buddies and they are going to pray for me and not judge me, wherever that is.
Right. But I think there's also, when I look at accountability, it's the way I would say it is speaking truth in love, right? It's got to have the in love part with it. That there's things that we need to hear that we are blind to. Yeah, I'm not talking about I got a checklist. Did I read my Bible today? Did I do this? Did I do that? Did I?
Yeah, I mean, we hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
And it's usually hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, because we have to pick up the phone and go, all right, Sam, this is the way you hurt me. And I love you, and I know you didn't mean to, but man, that hurt. And I mean, most of those phone calls come my way, but
that's
anyway.
Not true. You actually called me, and I know you called Robbie. And you had that exact conversation. And as a result of that, we became closer.
Yeah.
And things changed.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what it needs to happen.
And that's the love of Christ.
Right.
Christ didn't let things go.
No.
He didn't ignore things because it was going to hurt somebody's feelings. Now, he didn't always shoot from the hip either, which I've been guilty of most of my life. And so learning to do it in the love of Christ is
the hip is a generous term,
step.
too.
Yeah.
I would choose another area, but that's just me.
Well, you're usually in front of me, Sam.
Sorry. God, that was after hours for that part.
It is after hours, that's for sure.
Well, back to legacy. How does what we just talked about, that part, tie into legacy? When our people around us see the change that's happening because we're part of a redemptive community, it hopefully creates a hunger for them to either be a part of it or have their own. Mm-hmm. That they realize, I can't do this alone.
Right.
Is there any surprise, and I think there is, but in the whole COVID thing, the depression's up significantly. Mm-hmm. Record highs. Suicides are really up. Mm-hmm. Domestic violence is up. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the lack of community that we were built and made out of community.
Right.
And this has driven us into isolation.
Right.
And not good things come from that.
And sin does the same thing. Sin
Yeah.
drives you to isolation, which is where Satan wants you. And the only way to get out of that isolation is to find a group of people who are wanting to leave the same legacy that you're wanting to leave, and that is a kingdom of God where Jesus reigns and redemptive things happen. There's nobody since Jesus that has made it out of this thing without sinning and blowing it badly. I don't care who you are. The difference is those who blow it badly and have a group of people around them to say, hey, that's not the legacy you want to leave, right? I mean, the legacy you want to leave is one of overcoming difficulties, not creating difficulties.
Yeah, and part of what you were talking about with the head of university, the head of a mega church, needs a safe place. So does the head of a household, right? You know, if you don't have that safe place, you may not be able to leave the legacy that you want to leave. You know, obviously the first part of that safe place is in the arms of Jesus, right? I mean, that's the first place we can go. But outside of that, having at least one other person that you can kind of give that to, because, you know, if I don't get rid of some of the stuff that builds up throughout the day, I know how I'm going to be when I get home, right? I've got to find a way to get rid of those things so I can be more of the person I want to be at home, to leave more of the legacy I want to leave.
Yeah, and I think of my dad's funeral, you know, just for me, a really touching time of, like, here came all these men that laid hands on me and loved on me. It's one of the lowest points I can think of, you know, and here they were, yet there were so many people in that congregation and so many members of my extended family, like, going, look what Christ did. They remember me when I was the lone wolf. Nobody would ever see any friends around Robbie. And look what Christ has done. And so, you know, there's an opportunity that God has for you with a band of brothers.
And it also lets them see that, man, that's part of something I want. You know, I want to go do that. Go to masculinejourney.org, register for the upcoming boot camp. I know God's got something great there for you. I can't tell you what it is, but I know it's there, masculinejourney.org. We'll see you next week.
This is the Truth Network.